Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson today. We are listening to An Unexpected Killer.
December 1994, Catasauqua, Pennsylvania. A woman and her infant son are reported missing.
He called the police and he said something is wrong. His wife is missing.
Their disappearance sends shock throughout the community.
Everyone is easily able to identify with a situation like this and kind of put their own family in their shoes. There was some worry that she had been kidnapped or killed and that there was a killer out there. So there was some fear in the community.
4 months later, and their bodies are discovered in rural woodlands, brutally murdered.
The cause of death for Joanna was a gunshot to the face, to her head. And they could tell that it was a .22 caliber bullet.
When the police finally identify the suspected killer, they deny all knowledge.
She professed her innocence, and she made the case that she had done good things in life. The fact that she had lied about owning a gun, the fact that she had no alibi that stood up.
This is the heart-wrenching story of Joanne and Alex Katranak, their terrifying disappearance, and what fueled their killer to commit such a murder.
The jealousy was so great that this became the motive for murder.
Catasauqua is a picturesque city and historic steel town in Lehigh County, Pennsylvania.
Catasauqua is a diverse community. We have approximately 6,700 people. We're 1.3 square miles, and we're bordered by Lehigh Valley International Airport, the city of Allentown, Whitehall Township, and to the north, North Catasauqua Borough. We do have our share of crime, but not so much violent crime.
On December 15th, 1994, Andy Katranak arrives home to an empty house. Unexpectedly, his wife Joanne and baby are not there.
He came home, I believe he noticed that preparations had started for dinner. There was some chicken out, but she wasn't home. He thought she might have been home already, and she was not. He waited a little while, and I believe it was around 8:30. He started to get more and more concerned she wasn't home yet, and called his mother. She was actually supposed to meet his mother earlier in the day to go Christmas shopping. His mother said that Joanna had never showed up. You can imagine what's going through this poor man's mind at the time. He's worked hard all day. He's been doing that for a while, working on some friend's home about 10 miles from home. In the days before cell phones, he hasn't been in touch with his wife or his baby, who is 4 months old, by the way, all day long. Gets home. She's supposed to be home. He knows that she's gone shopping. So at first he's thinking, oh, maybe she was held up shopping. Things are not so startling to him at that time that he sits down. I believe he has a beer. Maybe he looks at the paper. But then he starts getting worried and he starts going through the house. And he goes down to the basement and he sees this basement door, this old basement door that they never use, is ajar. And the hinge on it has been broken. Amazingly, though, he doesn't immediately think break-in, kidnapping. He thinks kids, teenagers. He doesn't think that someone has really done anything because he can't find anything amiss in his house. Nothing seems to be taken. Everything seems to be in its own place.
But as time passes, Andy grows concerned and contacts the police.
When Andy called the police about 10:30 that night, he reported that the back door down to a basement area had been left ajar or broken into.
I just talked to Allentown Police, and they told me to call you guys. I live in Caddy on Front Street. And my wife and my baby have been missing since like 2 o'clock this afternoon. And we just discovered that the downstairs basement door was jimmied open. And that's really got us worried now.
The trouble with police, no matter where they are, if they're in small town Americana or if they're in a large big city, There are so many incidents of missing persons that when a man calls, "Where is my wife? She was supposed to be with my mother-in-law to go shopping. It's now 10:30 at night and she is not home." Well, this is just another missing person. This is just another situation. The police generally do not get all that concerned.
Officers eventually respond to Andy Katranak's house to follow up on the call.
An officer responded to that 911 call, went to the address on Front Street, and started his initial investigation. He discovered a hasp on one of the doors had been broken, and he also discovered some phone lines were cut.
With police starting their investigation, they receive a second call, this time from Joanne's sister.
It's now 3:30 a.m. in the morning, and Joanna still is not home. But her sister, Peggy, who knows what's going on and knows that Joanna's not anywhere to be found, lives about 50 yards away from McCarthy's bar, and she sees Joanna's car, a tan Toyota, in the parking lot. There's nobody in the car. It's locked. They call the police.
County 911, do you have an emergency?
Yes, my sister Joanne Katchanak has a missing person found on her. We're at 740 Front Street, and we just located her car next door.
Next door?
Yeah, but she's not anywhere to be found still.
Joanne's sister does make the call to the police. Now we found Joanne's car, and amazingly, we found it in a place where she's never parked before. She had her usual parking spot. We're all creatures of habits, and hers, not unlikely, was right behind the house where they had a parking area. Also, the car was backed in, and Angie knew that Joanne had a phobia about backing her car. She would work as hard as she could to avoid having to put that car in reverse. So now they call the police, and the police are out here again at the car.
The police come to the scene. They get into the car. They find the seat has been pushed way up close to the driver's wheel. That doesn't make sense to anybody. It doesn't make sense to Peggy. It doesn't make sense to Andy. The police start to look in the car, and they find blonde hairs that look like they're covered with blood. That doesn't make sense. There's a can of mace in the back seat of the car, and there's no baby paraphernalia. Wait a second. This is a mother who has a baby. There should be baby bags, diapers, bottles. Nothing's there.
I'd be looking at how many miles may have been put on that car since the time it was last filled. We do an investigation as to when the car was filled last. The hair from a dark-haired woman, why there would be light hair in that car would be a question to me. And why would there be mace in there?
Police start to suspect something sinister has happened and start examining Joanne's background and home life.
Common in missing persons cases, police will come out and take a report, but particularly with an adult, they're not going to be overly concerned right away. When they start to look into it, when they start to believe there's something more sinister going on, the people closest to the victim are usually very early on seen as suspects. And so it's not unusual to look at the husband, the boyfriend, or even an ex.
Well, the first thing they're going to look at is look at the family members. Find out what the relationship would be between the husband and wife, what the relationship is in the family, and find out if there are any issues. That's the first place to start. Joanne was 24 years old, had been in a previous relationship that resolved with some domestic violence, and she was quite younger than Andy, about 14 years younger than Andy.
Joanne, according to her family and friends, was really living a life of Camelot. But here she was with a 38-year-old man, 14 years her senior. She had a new baby. All indications from friends were that she was extremely, extremely happy.
Andy was athletic. He was strong. He was tall. He was, well, Joanne said he was everything.
But investigators know that appearances can be deceptive, and start to check out Andy's alibi and other possible reasons for her disappearance.
So often a husband is an early suspect in one of these cases. Police also thought that Joanne might have fled on her own. And thirdly, there was an ex-husband as well.
In December 1994, police in Catasauqua, a borough of Lehigh County in Pennsylvania, are investigating the mysterious disappearance of 26-year-old Joanne Katrinak and her 4-month-old baby Alex. Police start looking to the alibi of her husband, Andy.
Police have a set, pat view of life as to who is responsible for criminality. The husband is always somebody who is a suspect. The ex-husband is always a suspect. And they look at these people because it turns out that most of the time there is some involvement that they can find by doing this search of the usual suspects. Well, in this case, Andy was viewed as a usual suspect, and they wanted to know, the police wanted to know about him. Well, his alibi and his whereabouts were rock solid.
They're going to try and determine what his alibi was, what he was doing, what he might know about what happened. For Andy, he was working at a friend's house that day, doing some contract work. His father was with him for part of the day, and I believe the friend, the person that he was working for, came home and spent part of the day working with him as well.
Joanne's family are also insistent that Andy has nothing to do with their disappearance.
Joanne's family were 100% behind him. Joanne's mother said, "There's just no way Andy could have harmed Joanne. I see them. I babysat for them. I see how they relate to each other. They loved each other. There's just no animosity between the two of them. There's no motive." As you know, a husband is always the first suspect when a wife disappears. And so he was looked at really carefully by the state police. But one of the things that dropped him as a suspect was what the parents, Joanne's parents, were saying about his relationship with her daughter.
With the clock ticking, the state police who have joined the investigation decide to re-examine the Katrinak's home and Joanne's car.
State police secure the residence, process the house, and also process the car. Doing a good investigation and checking every possible lead is the best thing that you can do.
They wanted to examine the house again. They looked for fingerprints. They examined the door. The phone line had already been repaired, but they wanted to look at that area as well. And Joanne's car was taken to be searched and looked through for evidence. As far as entry into the home, police found the attempts to remove screws from the door and from a window. They didn't believe that anyone got in through the window, and the door seemed to be damaged.
A few things that they did discover, and one of the things which is underrated, is they discovered no fingerprints of any note. There were some fingerprints found on some objects in the car, but there were no fingerprints on any of the portions of the car that a driver would have touched, like the steering wheel or the gear shift or anything like that. That becomes important later on when I can make the argument that someone wiped that car down. Someone tried to hide the evidence in that car. What they do find out is someone who tried to wipe that car down missed. They found a tiny spot on the backrest of the driver's seat where there were 6 long, dirty blonde hairs. Along with that, and attached to that, they found very, very minute traces of blood on the backrest of that car in the same spot where the hairs were. And then later on, it subsequently was determined that that blood had been on the hair and therefore got onto the backrest from the hair.
The thing to remember about 1993 is that DNA was just about to become a popular item, but it wasn't widely used. Common tools police used at the time were fingerprints and serology, blood typing.
Investigators are starting to run out of other leads.
So one of the reasons why police started to move away from the theory that Joanne had simply run away. There was no usage on her credit cards. She wasn't accessing her bank. And she hadn't taken much with her. The only items that were really missing were her purse and the diaper bag. And family members said to police if she was going somewhere, she would have taken more than just that.
Reports of a missing woman and baby sends panic through the local community, and police start being inundated with calls and leads.
Nobody disappears in Catataqua, in Pennsylvania. It just isn't happening. But in this case, there now was a missing person.
It always hits close to home when a member of the community, and something like that happens to them, they go missing. Sometimes it all depends on what the circumstances are, whether the family isn't getting along. But most of the time when somebody goes missing, it's a concern to everybody.
Given the fact that it wasn't just Joanna was missing, it was also a baby, a young child, just new to the world. It really stirs the heartstrings, particularly given the time of year, Christmas. It's a time people are thinking of family, thinking of one another, and to hear that his family is being torn apart. With a missing child, a community like Catasauqua or throughout the Lehigh Valley, we're talking about a lot of families, a lot of grandparents. Everyone is easily able to identify with a situation like this and kind of put their own family in their shoes. So when they see the posters go up, they learn that a baby is missing, that a mother is missing, it really stirs the heartstrings, and oftentimes it leads to a lot of tips. Police receive more tips than you can imagine, and oftentimes they lead in a lot of different directions. Sometimes they don't help at all.
There were all kinds of reports. This happens every time there's a case. There's some people who want to inject themselves into the case, who want to become important by thinking they've seen something that's vital. In this case, I call them my rejects. There were about 30 to 50 police reports, and they even had the FBI in the early days follow up on some of it. There was a report that she was seen in the airport. A young woman was seen with a child. There was another woman who's insistent to this day that she saw Joanne and Alex in a grocery store buying $100 worth of groceries with a tall, strange man that was with them. There was people who allegedly saw her on the railroad tracks.
The police start getting all kinds of reports, and those reports are often misleading. So difficult for the police to have all these strange reports. Oh, I saw her driving down the street. No, I saw her at the airport. Came in a report. Oh no, she was at the store just yesterday. These are things which complicate the police's life. They don't know what to think. Is this just a young woman who has had it and gone off on her own, who ran away and went to the airport? Or is this a serious problem? This kind of thing confounds law enforcement. It happens all the time, and it's a dirty, rotten shame, particularly in this case.
The search continues, but Joanne and her young son Alex have simply disappeared. Finally, 4 months later, on April 9th, 1995, the police make a breakthrough.
4 months have passed, and there still is no trace of Joanna. Nobody knows where she is. Everyone now is resigned to the reality that this young woman, beautiful mother of a brand new baby, is probably no longer with us. There's a Paul Kovacek who's in his tractor. He's a farmer. He's plowing his field, and he sees in the field clothing. It's April, so he's doing his spring plowing. And he says, gee, what is that? And he gets out of his tractor and he goes and looks, and he finds skeletal remains. He is absolutely shocked. There's clothes and there are bags and the baby things nearby, a baby rattle. And he is frightened. He calls the police. And now, the whodunit really hits the fan.
April 9th, 1995. A farmer has discovered skeletal remains in woodland in Lehigh County, Pennsylvania. The remains are believed to be those of Joanne Katrinak and her 4-month-old son Alex, who have been missing since December 15th, 1994.
The discovery of the remains is terrible news. When a community knows that somebody is missing and you hear that remains have been found right away, just horrible thoughts are going through the minds of everyone that's been following that case. What the police found was the skeletal remains of an adult female, and the child, the baby, was clutched to her chest to the point where she had the child's face sunken into her chest a little bit. That positioning, when they turned the child over, it actually had preserved the child's features. Nearby, they found a rattle. They found some other of the belongings of Joanna and Alex. And I believe on the diaper bag there were some blonde hairs, very similar to the blonde hairs that were found in the car.
That's a huge break because it gives us so many different things. Number one, it gave us some forensic evidence. It gave us 2 hairs that we found there. It gave us a baby rattle, baby bottle, diaper bag with its contents, which were so important in establishing time of death to me. But more importantly, it got us the area. Who would have thought to place these bodies in this particular area? Usually, if you're just trying to get rid of someone that you killed, it's going to be along some highway, not in some remote area that you'd have to take right turn, left turn, right turn, left turn to get from Catasauqua to get to this remote field. So it gave us the area and it gave us some evidence. So that was a huge break.
An autopsy of the remains is able to tell police the cause of death, and an etymologist is called in to assist with when the murders might have taken place.
Forensic science has ways by which we tell how fast insects will invade the body to determine how long the body had been there. Literally, there are body farms where the scientists study the rate at which the body decays, and we can date the time. Well, the insect invasion here would indicate that the body was about 4 months old.
They did the autopsy. It was ruled a homicide on both the child and Miss Katrinak. They also discovered that she had been shot in the head by a .22 caliber, and they also found that she had been bludgeoned numerous times with a blunt object. Well, the theory at the time was that Miss Katrinak was abducted from the residence in Catasauqua and taken out to a remote location known by the suspect and murdered.
Investigators give Andy the heartbreaking news and ask him if there is anyone that would want to hurt him or wish Joanne harm. Andy mentions a phone call that was received a few days before Joanne went missing.
While Andy was being interviewed, he relayed to police a rather odd phone call that had taken place before Joanne's disappearance. An ex-girlfriend of his had called, and Joanne had answered the phone. There was some confrontation. It was a little bit confrontational. The ex-girlfriend, Patricia Rohr, had wanted to speak to Andy, and Joanne had told her that that was not going to be possible and hung up the phone.
At this stage, investigators take Andy to the area where the bodies were found.
The police decided that they needed to take Andy on a tour of the area to see if he recognized anything or something was to ring a bell in his memory that might be helpful to them. They were driving around the Heidelberg area in Pennsylvania, and lo and behold, Andy says, "Wait a second, this is where my girlfriend Patricia used to board her horses. She would ride in this area. She knew this area very well." And the police said, we got a break. We got a break here. This ride along has created a memory, and we need to follow it up.
As they started to look at Andy and some of the statements he made, and in particular in relation to Patricia, what they discovered was the night of the disappearance, or technically early the next morning, about 3 a.m., he had tried to get in touch with Patricia, even calling her mother.
So when the state police and the FBI went to speak with Patricia Rohr, they found She explained to them that she was suspicious of the fact that they had had a child because she didn't think that Andy was able to father a child. She explained to them that she couldn't leave her residence for any length of time, that she had gone to the feed store to get some feed for her animals, and she had gone to a tanning salon.
After speaking with Patricia a second time, much of her alibi and description of events began to unravel. The first time she had been very helpful. She had spoken to police about Andy and his relationship, questioned his paternity of the child. But during the second interview, what they realized is she didn't have receipts for any of the locations she said she had gone to, including for the animal feed. And at one point, she had claimed she had gone to a salon, and on that day, the salon told police they were actually closed. Another explanation that Patricia gave for her whereabouts was that she had gone to a nightclub, Cowboys nightclub. When police went to check on that claim, they discovered that attendees had to sign in to the nightclub, and yet there was no sign-in for Patricia Rohr.
Police learn more about Patricia's background.
Patricia Rohr was an old girlfriend of Andy, a live-together type relationship back from, I believe, 1985 through 1989. They broke up. Seems to me it was fairly mutual. Patricia would then contact Andy. Andy would never contact her, but he'd be friendly with her when she would contact him by telephone. In 1990, Patricia Rohr asked Andy if he would help her out. Rohr was beaten up. Andy came to her rescue, and Andy let her stay in his home. In 1990, the home where Joanne was taken from, for about somewhat less than a week, sometime in 1990. That relationship with Andy, as far as Andy was, it was over. As far as Patricia is concerned, we believe that she still wanted to connect with Andy on some level.
The evidence gathered from the car and crime scene gives detectives a breakthrough in the case.
There were 6 blonde hairs in the automobile that Joanna drove, that her sister discovered in front of McCarthy's. There were hairs which were discovered on Joanna's body out in the field, which were covered with blood, as were the hairs in the car, also covered with blood. And that blood turned out to be Joanna's, or perhaps the baby's blood. They weren't able to make the positive match, but it was close enough that they could tell that it was either Joanna's or the baby's blood. And then, in addition, in the bags which were found at the scene of the crime, there were more blonde hairs. Now, Patricia says, I'm not blonde. I'm a brunette. I have dark hair, you see. And when the police went to talk to her, lo and behold, her hair was dark. It wasn't blonde.
Patricia was a big horse enthusiast. About the time of the incident, Patricia was involved in a riding competition. Police looked at some photos of that competition and noticed that she had blonde hair, not the dark hair that she had when they interviewed her.
But then a photograph surfaced where she was riding in a competition in Oklahoma just a couple weeks earlier than Joanna's disappearance, and she had blonde hair. The examination of the hairs that police found is that they had been bleached blonde, and this was the connection that the police were looking for.
And once a known sample from the suspect was obtained, Patricia Rohr, we would compare the question sample from the seat back of the car to the known hair sample of Patricia Rohr microscopically, so that we could see if the characteristics were the same or different. If they're different, that's where the examination would stop. The characteristics look enough like the question sample from the hairs found on the seat back of Joanne Katrinak's car for us to proceed with a mitochondrial DNA examination of that hair and compare the mitochondrial profile of at least one of those hairs on the seat back to the known mitochondrial DNA profile of Patricia Rohrer. At the end, we found that the mitochondrial DNA profile from Patricia Rohrer, the known, was the same as the mitochondrial DNA profile from the hair, which can't tell us that that hair came exclusively from Patricia Rohrer. But at that point, we knew we could not exclude Patricia Rohrer as a source of that hair.
The things which led the police to have a strong, compelling case, one beyond a reasonable doubt, were the hairs. The DNA, the mitochondrial DNA match between those hairs found at the crime scene, found in the car, that they matched with Patricia. That really was what we will say game, set, and match. It was all over for her. But there was more. It was the lies which she told. The lies of saying, hey, I was at the Cowboy nightclub. You weren't there. Hey, I was at the salon. You weren't there. Hey, I bought feed at the grain store. Didn't have any receipts. Didn't happen. Those lies came back to absolutely haunt her when the police went to Patricia's house and they arrested her. One of the police officers overheard Patricia saying to her newborn child, if I had known, I wouldn't have brought you into the world if I thought I was going to be caught.
But Patricia Rohrer pleads not guilty, and the case will go to trial. On June 24, 1997, Patricia Rohrer is arrested for the murders of Joanne and Alex Katranak from December 15, 1994. The Catasauqua Police and Pennsylvania State Troopers investigating the murders believe they have enough evidence against her to secure a conviction.
We have the DNA, which is clearly about 60% of our case, but we also have motive, opportunity, means, false statements, phony alibis, and behavior that's just not consistent with innocence. So based on that, I told my boss that we had enough to convict, and we filed charges against her, and she was arrested on June 24th, 1997.
When police zeroed in on Patricia and decided to make a move to arrest her, they caught part of a conversation she had with her infant child, where she said, if I had known they were going to catch me, I would have never brought you into this world.
While preparing for trial, investigators and prosecutors learn more about Rohrer's history.
Patricia had an odd background. It wasn't so odd as to that other people of her nature, of her ilk, didn't have similar backgrounds, but the oddities here were enough that they're noteworthy. She would live in North Carolina, then she would move away, and then she would come back. She was a car salesman with a car dealership where people said she was very personable. She worked in a photography studio with her mother, and she would do photography with clients that thought she was very good at this. Then she got into trouble with neglecting her animals, and she was charged with animal abuse, which became very significant in this case because she had to have the receipts for the feed which she fed the animals, and she didn't have it. And she was with Andy for a while, and then she was not with Andy, and then she wanted to get back together with Andy. And jealousy was so critical in the motive for this murder.
The little I know is that her father did die at an early age of hers. I think she had a back injury from a car accident. She had a marriage which didn't last very long.
Even after ending her relationship with Andy ended, friends noted that she continued to talk to Andy. Multiple ex-boyfriends mentioned that sometimes she would compare them to Andy. So for her to continue to call Andy, to find out that Andy had a child with another woman, that could certainly spark an obsession or an extreme jealousy.
Patricia Rohrer's trial starts on Monday, February 9th, 1998. The prosecution bases its case on forensic evidence, circumstantial evidence, and Rohrer's obsession with Andy Katranak.
It was a powerful opening argument for the prosecution. They pointed to 8 items. They said that she had motive, she was angry over the phone call, she was looking to be in touch with Andy, she had a weapon that matched the murder weapon, she had lied to them, she was familiar with the family's home, and she was familiar with the location where the bodies were found.
I gave 8 different areas of evidence that we would be presenting, telling the jury exactly what I was going to do in the case. I also gave them, and it's standard for me, especially in this case, I gave them a little warning about circumstantial evidence. In Pennsylvania and most states, if not every one of them, circumstantial evidence, if strong enough, is sufficient for you to render a verdict of guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. In this case, since the evidence was largely circumstantial, I really beat that and made sure that they understood that sometimes circumstantial evidence is stronger than direct evidence. I believe that she surveilled the Katchenok residence from the late hours of the 12th to the early morning hours or the midday on the 15th. I believe that she saw Andy's comings and goings. I believe she learned from his comings and goings that he went early, arrived back late. I believe that she saw Joanne's comings and goings. I believe that she saw where the car was parked. She knew the house. She knew this basement. I believe that she went down to the basement door. I believe that she first tried to take some plywood off the door and then to make it look like there was no entry. I don't believe she wanted to make it look like a forced entry because I believe part of her thinking was this would be pretty neat if they just disappeared and Andy became a suspect or if no one thought that it was a murder. I believe that she didn't want to do anything there, but I believe that she wanted to abduct Joanne and Alex. I have no idea if she meant to kill them right away. Maybe she wanted to get the last word with them to really give Joanne a scare. I believe that when she heard Joanne was going out, I believe that she ambushed her as Joanne was putting Alex into the car. I believe she waited until Alex was put in the car, approached Joanne as Joanne was getting into the driver's seat, had the gun drawn on her, told Joanne, get in and drive, and that she got in the back seat. I believe she had Joanne drive to the spot where she remembered that she had ridden horses back in 1989 and 1990 because that was just a perfect place for her to have her little tete-a-tete with Joanne. I believe that at some point Joanne had to know what was going to happen and maybe started to yell. I believe that Rohr punched her in the face. Joanne had a broken nose. I believe that there was a lot of blood from that. I believe that Joanne struggled. I believe that Rohr won the struggle. And I believe that Rohr shot her and then stomped her. I believe that Rohr got back into her car, changed the seat so that she could fit into it, drove back, parked the car in McCarty's after dark. She wouldn't have done it during daylight. Got back in her van, which was parked somewhere in the neighborhood, not McCarty's, and drove back to North Carolina.
This is a case of jealousy. This is a case of where a phone call is made and a woman says to another woman, get out of my life. I am with this man now. He's not yours. This is jealousy, which seems to be one of the most ancient of motives for killing. It was something that triggered an uncontrollable rage, which resulted in shooting a woman in the face, 19 bludgeoning injuries to her body, and the death of a newborn child. Jealousy. Powerful, powerful tragedy.
Some more really good detective work is our forensics showed that the bullet that was removed from Joanne's skull could have been fired by certain types of firearms. One of them was a .22 Jennings. Other ones too, but with circumstantial evidence they were looking for a possible .22 Jennings as the murder weapon. The death could have been caused by either the shot to the face or the blunt blows to the body. either one separately could have been the cause of death. But blunt force and shot to face were the cause of death.
Police were never able to locate the firearm that was used to kill Joanne. They did know it was a .22 caliber handgun. An ex-boyfriend told police that Patricia did have a .22 caliber handgun. She had purchased it from a gentleman in a wheelchair.
When they discovered the body in the field and the coroner examined it, they could tell that there was a gunshot right to her face, which was the cause of her death and the fatal blow, and they could tell that it was a .22 caliber bullet, which caused her death. They're looking for somebody with a gun, a .22. They asked Patricia, "Do you own a gun?" "No, she does not have a gun," she said. Well, that turned out to be an absolute lie. The former boyfriend of Patricia said, "Oh, gee, we went to a garage sale, and there was this guy. He was in a wheelchair, and he had a .22 gun, and he sold it to Patricia. But the gun was really strange because it only could do one shot, and then it would jam. So all you could expect from this gun is one bullet." Well, this was a lie that trapped Patricia.
I think that $50 gun was thrown away in the nearest pond as soon as the crime was committed. I had no idea, nor did my investigators, nor did my forensic pathologist, as to what blunt instrument was used to brutally beat Joanne. I don't think we were thinking outside the box at the time.
The jury leaves to deliberate, and it is an anxious time for the prosecution and investigators.
My glass is always half empty. And so even though I thought we presented the best possible case we could, and I thought, parenthetically, that she was her own worst enemy, she convicted herself by her attempting to lie about every issue in the case. Ridiculous lies. Things that made her, to anybody, look absolutely guilty. So I was pretty well convinced that she had convicted herself. But I'm always worried about what a jury's going to do. The jury was out 4 hours, came back with 2 questions, went back half hour later, convicted her. This is after a 4-week trial. She got life in prison without possibility of parole. And, I have to say this, is that the victim's family, Joanne's parents, were against the death penalty. They told me that, and so I did not advocate for the death penalty. But it's not my call. It's the jury's call. And this is a death penalty case. It really is. I mean, the murder of a woman and a 4-month-old baby. But I left it completely in the hands of the jury, and I did telegraph to the jury that I was not requiring or asking for the death penalty. I've never been a death penalty proponent.
I was happy that our exams worked and gave the prosecutor information that could be used to help the jury make a decision about what happened in the case.
If I was going to ask Patricia one thing, it would be, was it worth the life of a mother and child?